Good evening, everyone. This is Brian Courtney with Short Bus Debate Club. As always, Darren Jolly is across the table from me.
Hi.
And this evening, we are continuing our interviews with third parties so that you guys can be guys, gals, however, whatever pronoun you want to use. So when you get to the polls, you can be more informed and, hopefully maybe vote for somebody other than the Republican, because they haven't been doing us a whole lot of good lately. So tonight, we have Steve Yurash with the Colorado Center Party. And for those of you that are not in Colorado, do not disconnect the podcast, because their candidates can be just as important as, someone in California or New York, because we can get somebody at the Senate or in Congress, or the House of Representatives, I should say, so that, it is federal level. And you are hoping to kind of expand out into other states too, right, Steve?
That's true. I think eventually, if this catches on, I think other states would like to do this.
So if anybody wants to, after listening to this interview, they say, I like what that Steve guy had to say, you want them to go to the website and fill out a contact form, or just give you a call or something along those lines?
You can fill out the contact form from the website, or you could send email to info@coloradocenterparty.org.
Beautiful. That works. All right. So let's get the interview kicked off. How do you want to do the order this time?
I'll
Okay.
So just to kind of introduce everybody to the main points of the Colorado Center Party. What is the main idea behind your party's platform? What are you trying to accomplish?
Sure. So we are trying to be in between the Democratic and Republican Party platforms on as many issues as possible. And that's not necessarily going to be true on every one. So we're closer to the Dems on abortion and gay marriage, right? We are not asking for any restrictions on abortion, and we support gay marriage. But we're closer to the Republicans on fighting crime, right? We support mandatory bail for violent crimes and most crimes that traditionally bail has been asked for. And we also want to secure the border. So we're closer to Republicans on that issue. There are divergence in there when you really start digging into, for instance, securing the border or crime, right? There are some additional things that we have that are different from Republicans. And we want to balance the federal budget. We want a balanced approach to taxation and spending, right? So we recognize the need that there are social needs in the country. There are military needs in the country. We have to have some taxation to do that. But our spending has to be more in line with what we're able to get from taxes. I think the budget deficits and accumulated federal debt that we have is a real present danger to everybody's livelihood, our economy, and the stability of the country. So I think that's very crucial. So that's the general idea. We're trying to be in between the Democrats and Republicans on as much as we can.
I think that's probably not a bad platform. I mean, I call them Demopublicans because I think it's just, one big room full of a bunch of people trying to do the same stuff and like two people. So
yeah. Oh, they do all kinds of horse trading on spending more money. Well, I'll let you spend more money on that if you let me spend more money on this, right? So, yeah, a lot of people feel that the two parties are not different enough in how they operate. Maybe some of the stated goals are different, but how much different has the results been when the different parties are in control? Not much difference.
So I've got a real quick follow-up question, and I don't know if it's an easy answer or not. But things have gotten to where it's a fairly hot button topic over the last probably 10, 12 years, where transgender rights, transgender, just, we will just say transgender lives and how they go about their lives and how society interacts with them. So you mentioned gay marriage and abortion, which would generally be, if you believe the media or the Demopublicans, more of a left-leaning sort of thing. Where would the Colorado Center Party fall with transgender peoples?
Well, yeah, that's going to be a tougher one for me to answer because we have not had a discussion on that as a group, right? We've had our platform committee. We had to hash through all kinds of healthcare things and spending things and crime things and the abortion stuff. We did not really get to the trans stuff. So I can only speak from what I personally feel, not the full party. So I would say that we need to try to support the trans people. They're going through something very difficult in their lives, and additionally marginalizing them is not good. But I think it's a lot different than that when you get to children. Adults can do whatever they want, and we should support them in the decisions they want to make regarding their lives. But for children, I don't think it's appropriate for the schools to hide from the parents that a student is asking to be called a different pronoun or is acting like a different gender at school, but not at home. Separating the child from the parent is just not appropriate. So there's that. I also don't think it's appropriate for people with a Y chromosome to engage in women's sports when all of the women have two X chromosomes. There are some physical differences there that I think are real, and that you're marginalizing the women with two X chromosomes if you allow trans people into those sporting events. So, and that's really tough because, that's not what the trans people want. And so, is there some other way to let them be who they want to be in those situations? I don't know. I think that's really difficult. So I'm not confident in what to do in that situation because I want to be as supportive as possible to the trans community. But this is the sports issue is it's just not right. It's just not. So we have to do something about that. And so I can understand you asking that question because it's in the news a lot. So, how do we deal with this and help the trans community keep their dignity? Is requires more thought of how we do that.
It's a complicated issue for sure. Especially, I mean, the two things that you mentioned, like the child thing. Like, I know when I was 6 years old, I wanted to, be a policeman one day, and I wanted to be a spy another day. And I'm not saying that a vocation is the same thing, but what I'm getting at is that my mind changed rapidly as a 6-year-old. So I don't know what the age cutoff would or should be. And then the sporting thing, Darren and I have talked about, like the UFC. I mean, depending on the sport, some of the females, born females, could really get hurt if somebody gets surgery and goes into, a cage match with that other person.
It's a very good example. I mean, there was female volleyball player that got smashed in the face by a trans participant, and that was not a pretty situation.
I always thought it was interesting that Martina Navratilova, who was one of the first openly gay, really exceptional sports individuals, and went through the trials and tribulations that she had to do in tennis, in the 70s and into the 80s. And when she came and spoke up about her being against transitioning and allowing that, like, she just got lambasted. I mean, just totally, it was like canceled. I mean, like brutally. And
which is not fair. So, but I think in order to really come to a better resolution on this issue, that's exactly the group we need to come forward, is the gay community, because they can speak to the marginalization in a way that I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we really do need the gay community to step forward and give us their view on the trans issue and what seems right to them and what doesn't.
Well, I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I think based on stand-up comedy and stuff that I've watched, again, poor example, I'm sure, but from what I understand, based on what some of these people are saying, is that trans people don't care what gay people think, because trans people aren't necessarily gay people.
Right. They're not. But
yeah, they're another thing to complicate the works, I guess.
Yeah, but again, I think the gay community would be better positioned to have some empathy about this than I do, right? So, right, and the thing is, we're trying to lump LGBTQ plus all into one group, and they're really not monolithic, right? It's like saying all Black people vote the same way and think the same. It's not fair to say that.
The world's much more complicated than that, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that was a solid answer. So basically no, I don't want to pigeonhole you, so I'm not going to say what I was going to, which was, on these social issues, you're more left, and on the fiscal ones, you're more right. But that's
if you had to describe it in one sentence, that's what we're trying to do. I mean, we have used the tagline of fiscally responsible and inclusive, right? So it is combining it from those two directions. In general, obviously everything's going to be more nuanced, but if you need a starting point to discuss it from, that's our starting point.
Okay, good. So now we're off to, another complicated question. So let's pretend, that you get elected into office, and whatever office, but that day you have the power to where you can resolve these issues: Social Security, environment, education, healthcare, foreign policy, and the U.S. economy. How would your party resolve them, and in what order?
So you left out immigration.
Yeah, I didn't want to put all of the hot button issues on there. But, yeah.
So I actually would put immigration first because we're getting thousands of people crossing the border every day. And Eric Adams, mayor of New York City, has said that this issue is going to destroy New York City. We got major problems in Chicago. We got major problems in Texas, which is why they're making a big fuss trying to bus people, the migrants, out of their state. All three of my kids, they're in their early 30s. They live in LA, so I visit LA a lot, and so I know what immigration has done to LA. So I would work on immigration first. I would pass legislation requiring the remain in Mexico policy for all asylum seekers or illegal entrants. Because that's why we're having the border crisis right now. Although, President Biden does not want to close the border. He wants to let in as many migrants as possible. He's doing that purposely. Okay. I'd rather not try to say what I think is the reason why he's doing it, but he's doing it. Okay. The laws have not changed on immigration between Trump and Biden. And there was not an illegal migration problem under Trump, and there is under Biden. Okay. So, but having said that, we need to increase the guest worker programs. Right. My whole career was in high tech. Lots of H-1B visa immigrants, although that program is supposed to be for temporary work. It's good for 6 years. They obviously, almost all of them become green card holders, but it takes a long time for them to get the green cards. And so why don't we have a skills-based immigration system so that we can have some immigration and not just be this flood of people without skills? So, because I think fixing the immigration problem would help with the budget and the economy. So the immigrants that are allowed to work, which is not really true of all the asylum seekers, but those that are allowed to work put downward pressure on wages. That was true in the high tech industry, and it's also true in other low skilled industries. So it's the government that needs to manage that, right? Do we really need more workers of the appropriate skills, or do we need to throttle it back to, protect American workers, right? That's a balance that individual companies cannot make. It can only be made by the government. Okay, so
hold on real quick before we jump into the other ones. I just want to make sure that I understand this, because, I've worked in IT for, I don't know, over 20 years. So I know that a lot of the people you're talking about come here on those work visas.
Right.
But you're talking about people that know what a routing table is, and they can create a patch, and they can do stuff that is different than the guy that is swimming across the Rio Grande to get here, with a couple of jugs of water on his back, who's gonna end up picking lettuce in southern Colorado, or working at Taco Bell in Denver or LA or wherever. So if I had to guess, I would say the reason Biden continues to let them through is because, one, if we paid all of them what we pay citizens or even green card holders, then the cost of every product, starting from, a pound of flour to your car is going to go up because, and that could be an exaggeration to some degree, but I mean, if we start paying them what we would pay residents or even, aliens that, what's the term they use? Anyway, it's the guy that the guy or girl that has a green card, or work visa. If we pay them that wage, then the cost of everything else goes up.
Well, I think we're getting more inflation from having these migrants over the last 2 years that are not working, because we're having to feed them, clothe them, educate them, and yet they're not working, right? But what you're suggesting by your question is that they're all being paid under the table. And
no, that isn't what I'm suggesting. I know lots of people here in Colorado actually have like Social Security cards and IDs. They're just not their Social Security card and ID.
Okay, so they've yeah, right. I mean, Colorado went to not the current version of the license, driver's license, but the version that I currently have that I need to renew. It was like a week after they started using the special printers for those that they were stolen out of the DMV offices so that, people could make illegal cards for people. So, but still, even if they have an illegal card, I don't think they're being paid less than other Americans, because that data has to still be reported. It's only if they're being paid under the table and not paying FICA taxes, etc., that they would be paid less. And I don't think our economy is supported by the labor from that labor source. That's just not true. That's just false. I think our economy got along fine without illegal labor. Now, in LA, there is a lot of illegal labor, and there are estimates that maybe 30 to 40% of the workforce in LA is being paid under the table. They're being paid cash so that it's not reported by the employers. Okay, and so that's a problem, right? Not only can those people be exploited, but they're not paying taxes. And so the tax burden on everyone else who's legal goes up, because we're still serving all of those people's children in the schools. The hospitals have to be run. Now, they may not be getting the expensive treatments, but they still show up in the emergency rooms. We have to have enough roads for all of them. We have to have housing for them. The people next door to my daughter in Van Nuys, there's 3 different generations living in a 3-bedroom house. 3-bedroom, I think it's 2 bath, but there's 6 cars in the driveway. They all drive Mercedes. Some of them are old and not too nice. Some of them are new and nice. But you've got 6 adults living in a 3-bedroom house because that's what they can afford. Now, the oldest generation in the house probably owns the house. I don't know, and I don't think they're renting. But this is repeated all over LA, and you've got maybe even in East LA, where it's a more Hispanic neighborhood, you've got people living in the garage, right? And that might actually be better than what they had in Honduras, right? So is there someone, going, oh, I'm going to oppress you. I'm going to purposely get you here so I can pay you a lower wage. No, I don't think it works that way. They get here and then they're selling flowers on the street corner or at the Home Depot, hoping for day work. When I do projects on my daughter's house. And so I go over to the Home Depot and the guy who can't speak English is there trying to help me load my lumber or styrofoam onto the truck. And I'm going, no, I don't want your help. Well, he's butting in, handling my stuff to help me load so that I'll give him $1 or $2 tip. I don't want that in my country, right? This is a recipe for disaster. The countries these people are coming from are failed states because they're overcrowded. The world is overpopulated and it's coming to our country, and it doesn't have to. It should be our choice, not theirs. You really hit my button on this, guys.
Yeah, let's stick a pin on that one, and you can.
I think we should go through some of the other issues first, and if you want, we can get back to it again.
Yeah, I mean it's all integrated, so like it'll go back and forth a little anyway. So.
Mm-hmm.
Carry on.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt with the.
Okay, so let's move on to healthcare, right? So I would try to do something about healthcare. So we've got there are some tricky, complex things that can be done, right? How many people know about pharmacy benefit managers? These are middlemen between the pharmacy and the drug companies that's enabled by some of our laws and regulations, and they really don't provide any benefit to the end user, but they mark up the drug prices a lot to fund their operation. But it's meant to sort of separate the drug companies from the doctor or the pharmacy, and it's an anachronism. And what we don't need the pharmacy benefit managers anymore. So we should either reduce their impact through further legislation or just get rid of them and eliminate the regulation that allows them to exist so that the pharmacies can get around them. Right? It's almost like, trying to get more generic drugs instead of having to buy the original issue drug from the company that first developed it. So it's a similar sort of thing. Obamacare was really big on actually limiting specialized facilities. So what's been happening is that most of the doctors no longer operate on separate facilities where they manage their own business. A lot of them are becoming employees of the hospitals. So the hospitals are controlling everything because Obamacare has mandated that if you have a facility, you have to provide a range of specialties, a range of services. You can't just be a dermatologist. You can't just be, something else, a specialist. And so while some of this specialization still exists, you obviously have specialized doctors. We all know that. But a lot of the facilities that are used for them are having to be part of larger hospital operations. And that's actually not good for competition and pricing, okay? Because now all these specialists have to feed into the profit of the hospital and everything. The transparency is no longer there, right? And so similarly, managed care organizations like a Kaiser Permanente or other things are more cost effective right, than other types of care providers. And so we really should reduce the regulations on those so that they can operate more freely and that they can offer their services more widely. Right. So there are efficiencies to be had in the current system that we're not allowing because of things being overregulated. Oh, we got to make sure that everybody gets a chance. Well, there's unintended consequences of all of these regulations, right? That they're well intentioned, but there are unintended consequences, and we've the legislature and the people who write these laws often miss that. Because who pays for it is a different issue than how it's delivered, right? So there are efficiencies in the delivery of the healthcare that are separate from the insurance and who pays, right? However, I would say that if we want to get to a balanced budget, we're going to have to cut back on some of the health care that the federal government is providing.
Because of the Insurance Assistance and Welfare Act?
Correct. So now maybe the states can pick that up, right? If the states want to increase their tax structure to pick that up for their residents, then that's where it should go, so that we're not using the deficit spending to do it, right? I mean, Congress is just making these laws willy-nilly without any regard to how much it's going to cost because the money is free. Oh, we'll just, print more money. Well, that's wrong. We're going to be in a heap of trouble because of the accumulated debt. So it would be better to have this stuff done at the state level because they have to have a balanced budget. So, it'll be up to the people of each state. You want to provide the medical care to these people, then, vote to increase your taxes. So that's where it belongs. That's what we need to do. We need to put all of that healthcare stuff at the state level. So, okay, so that's healthcare. The U.S. We on our platform committee, we definitely had some specialists in healthcare, and there was a lot of discussion about this managed care organization, stuff like that. We had a guy who was pretty familiar with that. Okay, but the U.S. economy. So I'm not a fan of the CHIPS Act or the Inflation Reduction Act, right? I worked for Intel Corporation for 23 years. That was a very long, and in the semiconductor industry for 38 years. But 23 years at Intel was a long time. That was about half the existence of the company, and yet that's a crucial company for the United States economy. Half of the Intel is, or at least was at the time, a couple of years ago, the largest private employer in the state of Oregon, right? Because they have so many facilities in Oregon. And those are really good paying jobs, right? So and they have a huge number of employees in Arizona. But falling in California because it's too high on their taxes. But so why do we need the CHIPS Act to give these companies more money? That's just corporate welfare. Now, if you want to, maybe reduce some of the other taxes they have to pay, so that it's indirect to make sure they stay in that's supposedly what the CHIPS Act was doing is, making sure they stay in the U.S. But, there's other ways to do that, like imposing tariffs on some of these other countries that are not allowing us to import into their countries, be it South Korea or China, right? I would rather see import duties on unfair competition than giving out government money that we don't have to these companies, right? I mean, it's the same thing at the local and state level where you have tax increment financing. You've got in Fort Collins and Loveland in northern Colorado, you've got a very big developer that puts up the malls and apartment complexes. And it's like, oh, well, let's get the city government to declare this a blighted area so that the developer can keep the additional tax revenue in his development to make it all look pretty. Well, what about the rest of the city? Why aren't they contributing their fair share of their taxes into the rest of the city to alleviate the tax burden on everybody else who's already there, right? So the CHIPS Act.
Given that context, then corporations should not be able to be in a position to where they have these loophole positions where they're not contributing in that context. Then you're
correct.
I like that.
Because so if all the companies paid their fair share, then your overall tax rate would be just a little bit lower for everybody else, right? Because everybody's paying their fair share and share alike, right? Mm-hmm. So the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, is also being misspent. More of this is coming out now that these things are actually happening, and you don't have to just read the legislation. You can see what's actually going on from the Inflation Reduction Act, which was misnamed, right? It had a lot to do with green energy. Well, there was a ton of money to train people in green energy jobs, or to have them to go around and deal with social justice issues involving the environment and green energy. Well, that's not really producing anything for the people. And the people who are supposedly getting trained aren't really getting any jobs. That's a waste of money. If you want to deal with green energy, then the money should be spent directly on purchasing solar panels, purchasing wind turbines, and installing them, and making sure the grid is able to use utility scale and investments in green energy to distribute the power. That's one of the reasons why green energy is not growing as much as it should, is because the grid it doesn't support the utility scale investments for the wind farm that's a little bit further away from the city, right? So you got to get the power distribution between the proposed location and the city. And there's all kinds of regulation and environmental impact statements that have to be dealt with, which prevents these things from being made. And so it's a problem. We need to fix the regulations so that you don't have to file the environmental impact reports if you're doing green energy projects. And we have to make sure that the government is funding the grid investments to allow these utility scale projects to go in. And because most people involved in politics remember Solyndra during the Obama administration. So Solyndra was a company out in California, right near in Fremont, where I used to work, like almost across the street. And so there was a bunch of money, I can't remember the exact dollar amount, that was given to Solyndra. Oh yeah, they're going to make solar panels. Let's give this company money. Well, Solyndra ended up going bankrupt. So what did the government get for its investment in Solyndra? Nothing. And it's just a scam. It's a scam. It's like, oh, this guy who runs Solyndra, contributes to my political campaign. I'm going to make sure he gets government money. Well, it's a scam. It's corruption. It's soft corruption. So the spending on green energy should be to buy solar panels, buy wind turbines from companies that make them today. Okay? So those are again around the U.S. economy. If you're spending, and so again, when talking about the U.S. economy, what's the big thing? Interest rates. It's going to kill off the economy. Why do we have high interest rates? because of excessive government spending on stuff that doesn't produce anything.
There's some other reasons. I mean, there are other things that affect where interest rates come from. I think that when you see like a huge increase in corporate profits and sort of like a correlation to rising prices. I mean, there are many things when you're dealing with like
I'm not gonna agree that corporate greed is part of this. I'm just not.
Not at all. Not one bit.
No.
I mean, when prices go up in X.
If somebody's making a bunch of money, if Google is making a bunch of money, then Microsoft tries to step in and compete. And so you've got excessive, the most common place where you have excessive profits is where there's a government approved monopoly, right? Where there's a lack of competition. So I'm a firm believer in the free market. Okay.
I am too. We've just never seen it.
Silicon Valley Bank, you know, I mean, every other day as soon as this the commercial real estate stuff starts finally donking and hitting the bottom. I mean, we know exactly what's going to happen there again.
Yep. Exactly. Commercial real estate is going to be a huge problem, and that could precipitate a banking crisis. Absolutely.
So I'd be more sympathetic to the arguments on, and I'm not arguing for no profit. I'm just saying that these are inputs that affect. It's not. There's no unidirectional way to say like this causes inflation, that causes. They all are sort of inputs.
You know, well, there's input costs, right? Price of oil, right, can be a huge impact on inflation because there's no substitute, right? It takes time for other green energy and EVs to get built and all that kind of stuff, right?
Or revisiting nuclear, maybe.
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of nuclear power. I think it can be safe. I think we know how to do that. I also think that, I have a physics degree, okay, but
yeah. I'm going to defer to you on that.
So yeah, and in terms of the nuclear waste, well, if you reprocess it and use the plutonium in a nuclear reactor to generate energy, then you would reduce greatly the amount of nuclear waste, right? And the only reason why we don't do that is we're all afraid that we're going to lose track of the plutonium and someone's going to steal it and put it into a bomb. Well, you can do that with uranium too. And so nothing's easy. And so nuclear power isn't easy, but I think it would be important. Anyway, so I take your point that, it's not just government spending, but government spending has been a big part, not the only part, but a big part of the recent inflationary spiral that we're in, and the interest rates are just a disaster waiting to happen. Education, I think we need to increase school choice to enable parents to get their kids out of failing schools if they so choose. A lot of different ways to do that. That is more of a local issue. It's not really a federal issue, but it's still an issue that political parties need to deal with, right? So the environment, we've talked a little bit about green energy. So we need to make investments in green energy, but I think nuclear power is green energy. And I think if we make investments in wind and solar, that the government needs to spend money that actually purchase solar panels and wind power, and not just spend all the money on training or research. It has to be on actually buying these physical items.
So when you say the government spending money on solar panels or turbines or whatever the green energy may be, are you talking about the United States government or even the state of Colorado or California, whatever? Are you talking about that entity actually purchasing for the state or the federal government, or are you talking about like for a large project, like for the Fed Center or or an Air Force base or something like that? Or are you talking about giving tax breaks to taxpayers and purchasing that way?
Well, we're already doing those tax breaks, credit.
Right. That's why I wanted to clarify.
But I think if we're going to spend any more money, well, so who uses the tax breaks to buy electric vehicles? Is it poor people? No, it's wealthy people who don't really need the tax breaks. So why are we doing that? Right? So we could spend government money to, help Xcel Energy replace the coal burning plants with wind and solar. And, how are you going to do the battery backup, right? Wind and solar is not particularly effective unless you have battery backup, right? And so are you going to require that anybody who puts in a solar panel on the top of their roof also uses a Tesla wall battery? That's pretty expensive. So shouldn't we be doing that at utility scale? I actually had when I was on the City of Fort Collins Electric Board, I did a tour of the Rawhide Power Plant, which is coal burning up north of town. It was quite the facility. The actual turbine that generates all of this electricity, huge amount of electricity, was not that big, right? The turbine itself is small. The building is huge because when you do go through maintenance, you tear the whole thing apart and you want all the parts to be laid out in a nice, efficient manner without losing track of where they go. The amount of energy that plant used to run all the blowers to get all the ash from the coal to collect in these huge bags, this huge building, was a lot. Almost 30% of the energy produced by the building went back into the building for all the mitigation effects, the collecting the ash. There was bromine sprayers to try to reduce the mercury. That didn't take a lot of energy, but it's still in there. So, but all of that kind of stuff. It was quite an amazing facility. So to think that using solar and wind is going to be easy, it's not, right? Because you need the battery backup. So there's, right, politicians want to make glib statements about how we're all going to die in 12 years. And if we just stop fossil fuels and buy a few more wind turbines, we'll all be saved. It's not that easy. It requires work, effort, planning, right? And so we really shouldn't be leaving these decisions to people who don't understand the complications of these items.
I agree with that statement wholeheartedly.
So in this context, you're basically, and one of the things that you're really pushing forward, other than obviously creating the battery backup position, because this is all for naught until we get that. That is an important question that we have to get to. But like the 1.4 billion that went to BrightSource for RFK, that company that he was sitting on the board of, it didn't really turn into anything. So if you're going to give these huge amounts of money, they have to turn into something where there's an infrastructure that's being created in a concrete fashion.
Correct. You have to have actual infrastructure that you're building. Yep.
Okay. What about all that money they were given to that company for basically burning tires? They gave them like a $5 million grant somewhere in Michigan, I think, and they were burning tires and railroad ties with that petroleum stuff on it because they were considered green energy under the grant thing.
Because it was like biomass or something.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about. But I can't remember the name of the company. But yeah, so the biomass thing, and
that's horrible.
Yeah, biomass has got to go. We need to find something better than biomass.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, most of Africa uses biomass already in the form of, cow dung to cook their food. This is one of the things that's really interesting. You look at the Manhattan Institute and some of these other think tanks that how can we get rid of fossil fuels in Africa, China, South America, when poverty kills more people due to lack of fossil fuel than anything else, right? How are you going to pay for their green energy, right? So like the Paris Climate Accord is all about America shoveling our money to some other countries. I don't like that. I think our money should stay here, right? We could share our technology, but I'm not interested in shoveling money overseas. It's going to get corruptly wasted.
Well, on the green energy thing, at least at this point, we have no choice but to shovel it overseas because most green energy uses rare earth elements, and most of the rare earth elements are coming from China.
Well, this is a problem that you pointed out, and the rare earth elements. It's interesting that they're not necessarily all mined in China, but they're all processed in China,
which is a nasty business. Ooh.
Yeah, and that's another point because there's a lot of ecological devastation that occurs from all that mining, and so the amount of mining that has to be done to change everybody into an electric vehicle is massive, and it's not really possible to do in a short period of time. So, there's.
It also does more harm than good. I mean, really.
It's not politically correct to say that, but looks like it's pretty much true.
There's little doubt that as we've been going through this process, talking to minor parties and third parties, that when we hit this point, we get a lot of pushback on it. So,
well, I don't think I'm pushing back.
No, not you. I'm not talking about you.
It's true. I've seen the data. I've seen the presentations, and it's frightening. It's frightening how many minerals, and then there was in Maine, there was a lithium mine that a company wanted to put in there, and that's what we need to do if we want EVs, right? But Maine voted it down, so they're not going to do it. Not in my backyard. Well, that's their prerogative, but don't be blaming me for not having an EV if you're not willing to put in the lithium mine, right?
It's easy to fix all the problems of the world when you're living life in the abstract,
Yeah, exactly. Abstract is very easy. Yeah.
So, in the party, like how do you? So, like you ran for Congress. Like how do you guys go through the process of choosing candidates?
So thanks for helping us move along here. So we have a biannual convention. The Colorado revised statutes pretty much require us to do it by a particular time and in a particular way. But basically, our 15-page bylaws say that active members can participate. So basically, you have to register to vote as center party and pay your $20 in dues. Then you can attend the convention and vote for the candidate of your choice to put on the general election ballot. And as long as it's just one candidate for that district, only active members within that district get to vote on that candidate, right? You go right, if there's only one candidate and they get approved at the convention in early April of 2024, then that candidate gets put on the general election ballot. Now, it is possible we could have two candidates for the same seat, right? And we would actually have a primary at that point that the county registrars would have to create the primary ballot for. But it's similar to the major parties in that you got to get at least 30% of the vote at the convention, right? So you could technically have three candidates that all split the vote equally to get on a primary ballot. You can petition onto the primary ballot. A lot of Republicans and Democrats do that because they fear that the convention's going to go in one direction and they feel they're the other direction and they'll miss out on the primary ballot because of the the lefties or the righties, depending on whether you're a Democrat or Republican, that show up to the convention can control everything. And this has been particularly true in the Republican Party, dominated by the right wing. That there a lot of the Republican candidates had to petition onto the primary ballot, including the guy from Loveland who was the minority leader in the House legislature. Had felt that he had to petition onto the primary ballot because he was being attacked by a Republican from his right extreme because the right wingists thought he was, too moderate for them. So I hope I'm answering the question. You got to be registered to vote as a center party. You got to pay your $20 in dues. Show up at our April convention. And that's how we do the platform as well. We do the platform every year at the nominating convention and then also at the convention, off-year conventions where we elect officers to the party. So we put together a platform committee that comes up with what questions should be voted on, and then we let all the active members vote on it. So the major parties are different in that they, at least in Colorado, they go through the caucus process. You have to show up at the caucus at your precinct, and then the precinct votes on who goes to the county assembly and the state assembly from that precinct. Okay.
So I was listening to a conversation that you had on a panel up at CSU where you started talking about the inception. When you did when you had to go through the process of getting the signatures and all that, was that 2022 or 2020?
That was 2022.
Okay.
I went through the petition signatures to get on the congressional ballot. Okay. So to create a minor party in Colorado, Colorado is one of the easiest states to create a party. Okay. Most other states are more difficult. So I had to get 1,500 valid signatures, valid as determined by the Secretary of State people. Very interesting process there. I submitted 2,164 raw signatures, of which 1,537 were valid. So I just made it. I
got you 600 signatures. He worked his butt off.
Yes, he did. I got about 700. Yeah, David got about 634. I paid two different firms. One of the firms got a couple hundred, 300 or so signatures for me. The other got like 140. I needed both of those. One of the guys was lying to me almost on a daily basis. He said, "Oh yeah, we're working on it. He had not even filed the paperwork to be able to collect signatures. And I had to call him on it. And our other candidates were going, well, this guy's a liar. I'm not going to deal with him. And I said, well, keep going. I know you haven't collected any yet, even though you said you did, but I'll take whatever you can get. So he collected 146, his people, right? And that was helpful. So I had to deal with these people who were not very scrupulous. Oh, and the other guy, wanted us to pay in advance. So I ended up giving him $1,000 more in advance than I needed to. And he never gave me the money back. Oh, I'm so poor. I can't give you the money back.
Wow.
Oh my God. So, it's like I've got other things to worry about. So in going backwards in time here, how did the party get started and how is it funded? So in 2021, I retired at the age of 60 from Intel. And after skiing 45 days that winter, I started working on the party. I did the website. I did all the paperwork, federal and state. And I spent about $22,000 sending out 35,000 postcards to unaffiliated voters to try to recruit enough people to start the organization, which is what we did in January of 2022. And so so it started out as a 527, so I could use all of my money to do that. I can't do that anymore. Now that we're a party, I can't just put in unlimited funds, right? Individuals are limited to $2,900 each. So our funding is pretty low at this point. We've got enough to keep operating, but it's going to change once we start getting candidates. And the press coverage we're getting now that we've become a minor party is great. We were on WGN in Denver in the morning. They did a little segment on us. I'm going to be on the radio on Monday. Colorado Public Radio already did a spot on us. So now that we're a minor party, we're getting a lot of interest, and so the money is already a little bit has started.
Don't forget Short Bus Debate Club. I mean, as far as press coverage goes.
Ooh. The Short Bus Debate Club, yeah, I've been on the Short Bus a few times. Both my daughters were in the debate club, so I'm familiar with the Short Bus. Yes.
So since you were talking about funding, I kind of gotta ask this, because due to the very openness of the party platform, I would guess that you would have lots of suitors. And I'm not making any accusations here. I'm just kind of curious, like, you lean right on certain things. So has the NRA said, "Hey, Steve, we'd like to, give you some money"? You lean left on some things. So as Planned Parenthood said, "Hey, let's, cut you a check." Has
not happened yet. We had one individual that he and his wife gave us about $5,000. Someone that I know personally here in Fort Collins, and he was a candidate a few years back. No, we don't have any of that happening yet, and I think it's going to really require some breakthroughs with a candidate or two of ours before we get that kind of money. I think those kind of organizations are pretty careful with their money, and you'll often find them giving money to people who are set to win anyway, right? Yeah. So because they want to buy influence with a winner. Mm-hmm. So we're not in that camp yet. I've written a blueprint or purple print, since the middle is purple. Gotcha. On what we need to do and to win. And a lot of that is going to really be trying to get into a race in a district where the Republicans or the Democrats are not putting up a candidate. And that happens at the state level. It's pretty rare to have that happen at the congressional level. But at the state legislative level, that does happen. There were 6 or 7 districts where the Republicans didn't run a candidate, and 2 or 3 where the Democrats didn't. And if we can get one of our candidates in there, then I think we'd have a real chance. When that happens to a libertarian, and there's a libertarian candidate and no Republican, they get 5 or 6% of the vote, as opposed to 2 or 3 when the Republican's in there. That's not enough, obviously. So I think that's what it's going to take in the near term, meaning the next 2 to 4 years. I think with ranked choice voting coming to Colorado in some of the municipalities, that people and voters might get used to it, right? If it works well and get some notoriety. We could have really used it in the Denver mayor's race. There were 11 candidates. So if we get ranked choice voting, then we could really things go a lot differently than it is today. Because let's face it, I mean, this is about third parties. Well, most voters, I mean, and I'm talking 90% of the voters are afraid to vote for a third party because they vote out of fear that the party that they hate might win. They may not love the Democrat Party all that much, but they're comfortable with them, and they can't fathom letting the Republican win. So they have to vote for the Democrat. They look for the D. That's where they place their mark. Similarly, on the other side, there's so many voters that can't fathom if the Democrat wins, they have to vote for the R. And they're just not open to the idea yet that, hey, we really should look at this third party. Now, Colorado is a little different today because the Republican Party is imploding, right? With the number of candidates and that were election deniers, and this Republican Party state chair being an election denier and being quite abrasive as well, that the Republican Party is imploding. The amount of money they're able to raise has really dried up. But if you look at the registration statistics, both the Democrats and the Republicans lost over 1,000 voters just in August alone, right? So that's happening like every month. They lose another 1,000 voters, both parties, because people are so disillusioned. But the voters are still, they may leave the party, but they'll probably still end up holding their nose and voting for the party they just left because they can't see, what's out there, what's an alternative. And that may change. That change is coming, but it's going to take time for third parties to make a bigger splash. And once we get one breakthrough, maybe the floodgates will open.
You've definitely talked a bunch about, like in the stuff that I've heard and like looked at on the website, you've talked about ranked choice voting a lot. I mean, that's something that like as a party, this is something. Are you familiar with like approval voting or any of these other sort of?
Yeah. And I actually have talked to Frank Atwood, who's the chairman of the approval voting party in Colorado. So, approval voting could work, but if I approve of two of them, how do I know which one is going to win if they're both getting lots of votes? I want to list a number one and a number two. So, approval voting, like I said, it could work, but like how would that work in a mayoral race with 11 candidates? So I don't know. We'll see. Again, we've got ranked choice voting in Maine and Alaska. I think Utah uses ranked choice voting a lot, again, because, right, if you've got too many candidates in one party, you need something like that, right, in the primary. There's also proportional representation. Right. There are people in Colorado who would like to see proportional representation. So in that case, you could have a super district where you combine 5 of the legislative seats together, and then the people in those 5 districts vote, and you assign the winners proportionally according to the percentage of the vote. Right. And there has to be some minimum threshold of like 15% or something. So that's another way to do it, but that's so far different than what we do today. I just don't know that would catch on. I think it would be a lot better probability that ranked choice voting would take place.
So I know you kind of circled around and you said, I want to go backwards from, how is the party funded? And I rudely interrupted you like I do often.
You can say that again.
I think he's done very well, so you don't need to apologize.
I just got to take my shots at him every now and again.
So you mentioned some of the meetings that you've got and, how you choose the candidates. Once a candidate is chosen or they say, hey, Steve, I need to run, do you guys have a formal steering committee that is going to steer their campaign, and how strictly do they have to adhere to your platform's
Nope.
ideas?
Nope.
No?
Nope. No such, they get nominated, the candidate does whatever they want. Right?
Okay.
The major parties don't have anything in their bylaws to make people heal. It's all about the money. It's like if you don't vote, if you get elected and you don't vote the right way on this issue, then Nancy Pelosi is going to take away your funding for your reelection campaign. So none of that is in the bylaws or an official party structure. That's how the parties work. And since we don't have any money to give our candidates, there's no control.
Right. So, one of the things that kind of bugged me in this last election, and I'm not saying that I want any party to control their candidates at all, but like the Libertarians, I always kind of felt a draw to that party. And then after interviewing them in 2006 for my website, I kind of decided that they weren't really the party that I thought they were, and I decided that I was a Jeffersonian with environmental leanings.
Okay.
But with that being said, the reason that the Libertarian Party sort of disenchanted me this last election was because somewhere here in the state of Colorado, there was a guy running for state rep, and he actually said that he was pro-life and that the government should not allow this type of stuff to happen. Well, that goes against the libertarian belief structure. I mean, you can be religious, you can believe in pro-life, but you shouldn't be running on a platform to say, well, we need to change this law. So that's why we kind of asked that steering committee question to see, how much you guys are going to nudge these people in one direction or another, and not saying that you're going to blackmail them with or bribe them with campaign assistance or lack of campaign assistance.
Yeah. So like I said, we don't have any means of controlling the candidates, and we've already had we had two other candidates that were unable to get onto the ballot in 2022. We've got a couple people who are interested in getting on the ballot for 2024, and we're definitely not monolithic in our candidates. We've got some people who have different ideas about what the center really means, right? And we have discussions almost every time we meet in the executive committee to talk about what it means to be a centrist. So it's somewhat fluid because we're still pretty small. It's a fairly small number of people who are deciding today what it means to be a centrist. And that could change over time as more people get involved in the party. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how it goes. But I mean, if you look at like the Forward Party, they don't have a platform. They purposely don't have a platform. They have three very broad principles, a thriving people and secure democracy or something like this. And, it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, they purposely picked these broad principles so that they could attract as many candidates as possible that don't want to be a Republican or a Democrat. And so they're taking a very different approach, not having a platform than we are, which, yes, we have a platform, but I'm actually surprised that we have so much variation in the people on the executive committee and our candidates. And I think it's going to stay that way. I think there's going to be a fair amount of variation. But if you think about it, the Republicans and Democrats today are pretty far apart on a lot of stuff. So actually, there is a lot of room in the middle.
So let me just ask you, because you brought up the Forward Party, like, and obviously, like you said, you don't have anybody putting a bunch of financial pressure on you, but like, why would you go this route instead of like connecting to something like the Forward Party or like No Labels? Like, how do you distinguish yourself from those other people that maintain this sort of like centrist or forward sort of like rhetorical disposition?
Sure. So I didn't know that the Forward Party was going to do what they did when I started the Center Party. Right. So they do have some money, more than the Center Party has, but they're trying to get 10,000 petition signatures just with volunteers. And I don't know if they're actually going to be able to do that. So they may fail, whereas the Center Party has already succeeded in getting minor party status. No Labels spent $107,000 with just one firm blitz canvassing. I think they might have actually spent some money with another one as well. There was a big article in Politico about the $107,000 that No Labels spent with Blitz, because Blitz canvassing is known as a Republican firm. And so Politico was going, oh, well, No Labels is just a bunch of Republicans because they use this Republican firm. Well, come on. I mean, I've had to deal with some of these firms, and you don't care what their ideology is. It's about the money. Just Politico, I thought, was just showing their bias in that. But in any case, I like No Labels. They're pretty intelligent about what they're trying to do, but their bylaws for Colorado is 3 pages, and it basically says the national organization will tell the state what to do. So there's no means to be able to select candidates for down ballot races, which is what the Colorado Center Party is all about, right? And yeah, No Labels is centrist. They've got Republicans and Democrats that are part of No Labels, but there's no platform and there's no means to be able to generate one, right? It's all controlled by a few people at the national organization level. So the Center Party has bylaws and a means for participation for the regular members to direct the party in what direction they want it to go. And so it's much more democratic than any of those other organizations.
I just want to, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. And I think Forward's interesting because they're primarily, at least it sounded like when I was listening to Andrew Yang talk about, they're doing a lot of stuff like California specific, like that. There's not at least for the last year, there was a bunch of stuff that I was listening to him say with regards to that. But the No Labels one is it's sort of a curious. I mean, do you have any opinion on what their MO like really is? Because if you want to talk about like a spoiler position, like if Joe Manchin ended up running for president, that's going to F somebody up severely.
That's what they're going to do. If it's Biden versus Trump, they will put Joe Manchin or maybe Larry Hogan up as the presidential candidate. And I thought Kristen Sinema would be interesting too, right? Because she registered as an independent. So was she setting herself up to be part of this too? I don't know. She's not been part of any of the meetings, whereas Joe Manchin and Larry Hogan have been. So yeah, there's all kinds of articles every other day about No Labels and there being a spoiler, and the Democrats are more worried about it than the Republicans. But so it'll be very interesting. Now, you mentioned California and the Forward Party. Well, the Forward Party is not going to even attempt to get on the ballot in California. They are connecting.
Really?
Yes, they are connecting with the Common Sense Party that already had 60,000 signatures. And because of COVID, the state is allowing them to keep those signatures and continue to move forward to try to finish the job. But it's a huge number of signatures that the Common Sense Party is trying to put together. And that is chaired by former Republican Congressman Tom Campbell, who I had actually met a couple of times when I was in college out in Silicon Valley, where he served. Nice guy, by the way. So it's actually Common Sense Party in California. And yeah, what's funny is that they can't really change the name. I mean, you can't say, oh, well, we want to take these 60,000 signatures and say that they were used for the Forward Party. It's like, well, no, your petition said Common Sense Party. But it makes sense, I think, for the Forward Party not to try to put any effort into California. They're so close to what the Common Sense Party is doing. It's fine. The thing about the Forward Party, though, it's like, oh, that's Andrew Yang. Oh, that's universal basic income. So there's huge baggage with that they may not be able to outrun the universal basic income that Andrew Yang had supported for so long, even though they take great pains to say they're not doing that anymore. But it's an interesting combination. So there was David Jolly and Serve America movement and the Renew America movement, two former Republican-ish organizations that were trying to start third parties merged with the Forward Party. Are you familiar with that?
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah. So the SAM and the RAM had some interesting staff people that were doing good work, but they weren't really getting any traction. Forward Party similarly needed some better staff people, and they decided to make a three-way merger. And so it's an interesting combination of some more, right-wing. I shouldn't even call them right-wing. They're left, right of center, former Republicans, and the left of center Yang people. And when I went to the event down in Denver, it was interesting because it's like, well, what's going to happen when they actually get a candidate? Is it going to be a Yang candidate or a former Republican candidate? And how are the Yang people going to react to that? Because some of the volunteers are very progressive with Andrew Yang. So they may have some trouble keeping things together when they move to the next phase with actual candidates. That's my prediction.
So in the spirit of the next phase concept, based on like the way that you sort of painted the picture is that there are some like financial limitations with regards to where you're at right now in this moment, but March, April's coming soon. There are some people that are ready to think about throwing their hats in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see, so like in terms of time, like what are the short-term, mid-term, and sort of long-term goals of where you're at and where you're moving towards?
Well, short term, up until the end of the year, even into January and February, we're going to be doing candidate recruitment. I guess candidate recruitment in January and February is a little more difficult because in order to run as a member of the party, you have to be registered to vote in the party by like the first Monday in January, first business day of January. So up until the end of December, we're going to be doing candidate recruitment, right? So we talk to city council people, commissioners or candidates for county commissioner, people on boards and commissions in counties and cities. And we've already done some of that, but there's a lot more work to do. And it'll be a lot better now. We've got a nice little brochure we put together that we can put in the mailings, and that looks pretty professional. And of course, we actually have minor party status. It's not just something that's going to happen. It has happened. So candidate recruitment should go a little better. So that's short term, and we don't need a lot of money for that. That's more a time thing. So that'll be what we do up to December. And then, we get our candidates together. We work on strategy, maybe a little bit of fundraising, because our candidates can actually announce at that point. And, we are getting some play in the press now. And so, it's really trying to get the breakthrough. And even if it's a city council candidate that's technically nonpartisan, if the person says they're center party, I think that could be interesting. We already have someone who's on city council in Centennial who I'm in communication with pretty regularly. She may switch to our party, maybe. So that's the strategy for 2024, is to really target, a few candidates, and particularly in a district where we can try to get on a one-on-one race with just one Democrat or one Republican, so that we actually have a chance to win. And once we break through on one victory, all hell will break loose. It'll be huge news, right?
And given what you said about the Republican Party, there might be some windows, like at least, yeah, okay.
Correct.
It's all about the breakthrough candidate, though, for all intents and purposes.
Exactly.
So was that you've got some longer term goals though, right? Or was that all of them through 2024, and then are you gonna try to surprise us in your statement, or?
Oh, it's all very tactical at this point,
Okay.
It's so long term. It's just we got to keep pounding and get a breakthrough candidate somehow, and then we reevaluate the strategy at that point for the longer term goals, right? And it's not worth spending my time on longer term strategies, because there's no guarantee any of our short term goals are really going to make it. It's scratch and claw time at this point.
Scratch, claw, reevaluate.
Yep.
Rewrite the goals and do it again. Okay. So I guess we'll just move on to number 7 then, and that's, what would you change to make the political process better for, your party, and I think most importantly the voters?
Well, ranked choice voting. I think we need that to eliminate the fear that people base their voting on. They vote based on their fear, which is why negative campaigning works. And if you used ranked choice voting, so one of the interesting positive things to say about ranked choice voting is that it has the potential to eliminate all the negative advertising, right? Negative advertising, you diminish your opponent because a vote that comes away from your opponent goes to you. Well, what if that vote went to someone else and not to you? Then you really need to spend your money building yourself up and campaigning positively rather than using the negative message so much. Maybe you do a little both, but you couldn't do just negative campaigning. So I think ranked choice voting is something that we're really going to focus on, and I think that would really help the political process. As far as, our party, so we've got some pretty good mechanisms set up through our bylaws and how we operate that are pretty good. We definitely need to attract more people just to participate in regular party activities. The executive committee, we have room for more executive committee members from each of the counties, etc. But our CV is it, ranked choice voting.
Okay. Well, so I'm guessing that we're coming up close to the end now. So you
Yes.
want to give a brief statement to our listeners and let them know why the Center Party, and I guess just say whatever it is you want to say.
And tell them where to find you too. So
Sure. So cocenterparty.org. You can also spell it out, coloradocenterparty.org. We own both domains. So and there's all kinds of stuff on the website. The full platform is there. You can even read the bylaws. You can see more information on me. I've got a couple of videos. We have a Facebook page, Colorado Center Party. And we've made some posts there on the Facebook page. We have an Instagram page. So yeah, we are trying to be centrist. We're trying to be in between the Democrats and the Republicans. It's really hard to know in polling if there really is a majority in the center or not. Not everybody thinks of the center as the same. Not all of our candidates will think that the center is the same as each of the other candidates. But this is the only good alternative if you want to have more inclusive and liberal social policies and be inclusive, and yet have a more intelligent, thoughtful government that doesn't spend money like it's going out of style. And that's even true in the state. In Colorado, property taxes are going to go way up, and so there's going to be something on the ballot for property tax changes. And if it's a one-party Democrat rule, watch out for your pocketbook, right? So the Center Party wants to be that alternative to bring civility back to politics so that we can have a real discussion between legislators, and not just to have, well, you're on the other side, it's my way or the highway. We win, you lose. That's never a good discussion to try to manage your government that way, because you'll just have ideologues using their extreme ideology. And the two parties, Democrats and Republicans, are getting more extreme every day. That's how the primaries and the party control fixes things. It's the extremists who show up to their meetings and control everything. And so the Center Party is a way out of that, and to try to balance things off. Because if you don't like who's in control now, are you going to give control over to the other side wackos? No, you want something in the middle to balance the two sides off of. And that's what the Center Party is here for. We want to help independent-minded candidates, because it's really hard as an independent. Petitioning onto the ballot is really hard. So the Center Party is a repository for supporting these kinds of centrist candidates. You need a party structure to do that. You cannot rely on a new individual coming forth each time, relearning everything from scratch. You need a party structure to stay there and help these candidates to achieve something. So that's where the Center Party is. That's who we are. I do a lot of this stuff. I do the website development. I do all the voter stuff. We've got a Twilio account where I sent out several 100,000 text messages during my congressional campaign. It was very cheap because we do it ourselves. We're not paying some huge consulting firm. So if you are a candidate out there that wants to be a centrist and wants to get things going, I can help.
Do you just, I mean, I'm not asking you to, but do you have any interest in throwing your hat in the ring again after that experience, or as a candidate, or?
Well, not at the congressional level. I think I might run at the. I'm exploring the possibility of running for state house. It's a much smaller district, doesn't get as much attention, so and I think people at that state level, at the state house level, will have less fear in their voting patterns.
You're up by Larimer County, right? Somewhere in that general vicinity.
Yes, I am in Larimer County, exactly.
Well, this has been great for us, and I think the listeners too. And remember, listeners, even if you're not in Colorado, the Center Party might be the right party for you. If you think you want to talk to Steve, you know where to reach him.
www.cocenterparty.org and email info@cocenterparty.org.
Beautiful. Do you have any questions for either Darren or me?
No, you've been great hosts. I really appreciate what you guys do and giving me all this time.
Awesome.
Not a problem at all. I'm going to convert this MP4 into an MP3 tonight and then get that posted. So, and I started following you on X earlier today. So
I don't post much on there, but yeah, I need to start doing that.
I'll shoot you an email with the link to the show, and then I'll also put it on Twitter so that you can send it out via your personal X, your personal X or whatever.
Yeah.
So that you can get it out to your people too.
Great. I would like that very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for everything.
Thanks so much, Steve. We'll talk down the road.
Okay. Have a good evening.
You too.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.